All right, I'm going to get started with the workshop. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Zach Keifer. I run a small independent production company in Charlottesville, Virginia. And so there are many more qualified alumni here to speak about the industry itself, but I thought maybe I could be a good connecting point to filmmakers and companies in the Virginia State area. Currently, I'm in the process of editing 2 feature films, feature documentaries, and 2 short documentaries. And my company is called Octillion Productions. And so we're here to talk about documentaries. And at the heart of documentaries is, of course, the question. The correct answer is always a question or questions. And so we're going to break down documentary. What does it mean? Doc comes from the Latin docere, to teach. We have U, which is the Phoenician letter wow, by way of the letter Y. U by the way of Y, to teach you. We then have ment, a food item often consumed as an after-meal refreshment, dating back to the 18th century. And airy, which is archaic for airy or light, i.e. the light that shines on the dark corners of the fragile ecosystem that we call existence. That's heavy. So what's in a dog? I certainly was hoping this to be a little more interactive, but we are gonna just keep going.
Interact with you.
Yeah.
And I guess this whole workshop came from the process of that my experience at the college was very narrative based. I think a lot of people's entry point into filmmaking is narrative. It's the most exciting, it's the most publicized and advertised, and it's just the thing that as kids or young adults really sparks our imagination and drives us to wanting to do film in whatever way we can. And so I actually came later to documentary. After graduating college, I landed in Charlottesville. I asked who was making films, ended up on a film set for a independent horror film called House Hunting, which starred the Beast Master, Mark Singer. And I met my business partner on set, and he was doing a documentary. So I didn't get into documentaries until I was in my 20s. And just to sort of generally break down documentaries, we all know what they are. It's focusing on someone or something. It's asking Q's and filming A's. Questions, filming answers. And editing and editing. And of course, I'm using maybe a looser term for documentary. I think some people might anticipate it as a feature doc or a short doc in a festival, or these days it's like a murder series. Hey, welcome. Are you here for the workshop?
To take photos.
Oh, gotcha. You're gonna want to take close-ups.
Okay.
But I guess I'm expanding the idea of documentaries to, any kind of short piece that's maybe a little bit more promotional, but any kind of film where your main goal is to explore something through the art of film and sort of, I guess, make some kind of statement on what that piece is. So we've kind of been diving into the narrative versus documentary angle. And I think the thing about documentaries, especially when you don't put too many limitations on documentaries, is barriers is a huge thing that's different between narrative filmmaking and documentaries. With narrative, you have limitations with creating a script, finding locations, equipment, time, crew, money. And with documentary, you have issues with finding script, locations, equipment, time, crew, or money. But you can always scale down a documentary, and you can scale down narratives, obviously, but I think documentary has a more natural, sometimes it's ideal to scale it down. And it really becomes just about equipment and time. And certainly if you're attending the College of William and Mary, equipment is not an issue. So then it's just an issue of time. But the thing about documentary is that sometimes it's important to be solo or have a very tiny crew because you can be a little more intimate and get to know your subject in a better way than you could on a less personal, larger set. So this workshop really is all about empowering and encouraging you to go make a film. So I have a quick doc recipe. All you need is one interview and one activity, and you cut those together 1 to 2 minutes. And you can go shorter than that, but obviously going shorter actually makes it more difficult to do successfully. So you can make a film right now if you wanted to, if you have a camera, you have a phone, and you can make it now. And the biggest issue I think is just our choice to make a film or not to make a film. And a lot of times we see the difficulties and we don't get out there and try it. But I would suggest that you forget all those things and just grab a camera and go make a film. The catch to all this is the research relationship, which is that, of course, with documentaries, you want to spend more time preparing and meeting and building a relationship than you do actually making the film. Asking questions before asking questions. So the beauty about documentaries is before you even make a film, you're gaining an experience, you're gaining a relationship with someone or some event. You basically have to determine that there's something you'd like to go film, and then you have to approach people, you have to start a conversation. And so the best thing about that is that from the very start of it, you've already created an experience for yourself that is unique to pretty much anything out there. And with narrative, I think you can get lost. You can be lost in a script that you work on by yourself for a very long time. And you don't sort of get this sort of immediate interaction or experience out in the world. And the great things about doc is even if you fail to complete the film, you will at least have gained some kind of experience for yourself. And so handshake versus years of life. This is sort of sliding spectrum of documentary.
Is it I'm late?
Hey, no worries, Brian. And so the handshake versus years of life is really your decision to how much you want to put into the documentary. You could meet someone that day and make a film about them, or you could build a relationship over time. And I think each approach has its value. And I wouldn't ever say one is better than the other, but certainly as you progress, if you make more films, you always want to try to go at a higher level. Oh, thank you for the water delivery. And so the big thing about documentaries, and perhaps the biggest barrier to starting, is how do you choose a project? How do you choose a relationship? Because that's what documentaries really are, is you're choosing a relationship with the material that you'll be making a film about. You'll be spending time and connecting with that, whatever it may be. So the keys to that are obviously something of your interest, something that's accessible, and the challengingness of it all. So I think this all depends on your level of filmmaking, where you are. If you've already made a film before, then you don't have to find something that's completely your interest. It might be better to find something that you're not interested in. Accessibility is always key. And I think anything can always be accessible. It's just a question of how much time you want to put into making it accessible. And of course, the challengingness is that's a barrier to actually getting the film done. So if you're new to filmmaking, try to pick something extremely easy, like a roommate. Make a film about a roommate, or your own pet, or a family member. If you've already made a few films, then try to actually pick something that you'd have to get permission to film, like a business or a nonprofit or a person that you know of, but you haven't met, and challenge yourself to go meet them. and see if there's a relationship that you could start and the ability to film. And so, yeah, it always comes back again to the question. You know, I think you can always aim high and you'll get that experience of what is it like to just ask to go up to somebody, or in personal business, you know, who is the person that you need to speak to? You know, do research. Is there some other portion of the company you didn't know of that you were originally interested in, but is actually maybe more accessible? Then you could explore that. So, but again, this is the question before you get to the question, before you get to the question. And the best thing about documentaries is it being art as experience. So with narrative, you have lots of experiences, but the production side of it is more of you get the experience of being on a film set and making a film. And then normally you're making a film based on some previous experience you already have, whether it's a genre of film that you've watched and you're interested in, whether it's some life experience you've written about and you're trying to turn into a film. Basically, narrative, obviously there's always exceptions, but narrative is the process of sort of translating already existing experience and then gaining the on-set experience you have while you make the film. Documentary is more subject-based. So the experience you get is by going to a rodeo or going to an art studio and meeting and filming. You're actually also getting that experience. You're getting secondhand experience from the individuals that you were meeting. And then you also get the film set as well. You have to learn how to bring equipment, when to film, you have to schedule. And so even though it's not the narrative film set, you're still getting that experience of being out and trying to capture the footage that you need. So yeah, I'm just gonna hit a few experiences that I've had from making some documentaries. Had the opportunity to make a punk rock documentary, and the best thing from the personal side of it was it wasn't just a punk rock documentary, but it was the last tour of a band that had been going for 10 years. Hello. Welcome.
Sorry, I had class.
No worries. So yeah, I'm just kind of breaking down some documentary stuff, and I'm just getting right into some of the work that I've done.
Cool.
And so this is called a doc called If We Shout Loud Enough. And it was a band called Double Dagger. They had been active for 10 years and they went on a final tour. My business partner was friends with them. So he put himself into the crowd and filmed their last tour. And then my partner and him, we built it out and made a documentary after the fact. And I got to film at the final show. And it was just amazing because it was this Baltimore community of sort of the more sort of underground scene where they have this whole music scene had come up basically. And so I got to sort of be just an observer of this wonderful community coming together to celebrate this band that was leaving. It was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. Then I also got to go to Vermont for a week and we hung out with this turtle. It's a wood turtle. Got to travel and experience the ruralness of Vermont and got to make a great doc with this wood turtle. It was a fun experience. And then I also was making a film about a local rental house in Charlottesville that closed down. And so again, it was another community that I got to sort of meet and also be present at sort of a very emotional time when they had to close down. And you just get to sort of, these kinds of experiences which you can get these sort of docs is just remarkable because you meet people and you just participate in a way that you never would have had you not done the project. And so filmmaking goals, I think that's always the question. If you have an interest in film, you know, what do you want to do with it? Is it a hobby? Do you have an interest in making documentaries for personal reasons? Do you want to have a business? Do you want to go to Hollywood? And so I would say for both narratives and doc films, you can get success by one, being able to start a project, being able to do the middle of the film, and then do the end of the film. And then you got to repeat and try to do it bigger and bigger, but bigger and better than you did it last time. So, I mean, that's success for both narrative and documentaries. And some strategies for that is, I would say, particularly if you're starting out, make the fast film. Don't try to do anything too epic or too challenging. Just make a quick film, because the greatest thing you can have is experience in the type of filmmaking that you want to do. And documentary is obviously an easy one to jump into. Narrative is a little tricky. And I'm going to say make the first or next film. So I think the biggest thing you want to do is make your first film. And then immediately after you've made your first film, you want to make your next film. Now, if you're doing this as more of a hobby, then, you know, one film is fine, or even a partial film is fine. So it's just really up to how ambitious you want to be with it. But I think whatever it is, you know, the best thing you can do is at least make one film. And then the second best thing is make 2 films. And so collaborate. I would say, again, I don't know, I've been out of college for a bit, so I don't know how it works, but there is a natural tendency in filmmaking to try to do everything yourself, just because you get inspired, it costs money to bring in other people, or it costs their time. You have to either call in some favors, or maybe somebody else is also trying to make a film, or your friends don't make films. So it's very complicated, and the easy thing to do is to just do it yourself. And I would say, again, as far as barriers, if you can make a film by yourself, you should make a film by yourself. But there's ever an opportunity to collaborate with somebody, then you should do so in any form. And I think we probably overthink what collaboration might mean. I think it can be as simple as showing a rough cut to somebody, asking their advice. It could also be asking their advice on a project, you know, or you could sort of just ask somebody if they wanted to make something together. The beauty about college is that a lot of times y'all are at a pretty similar place in the filmmaking sort of experience. So you do have a lot of opportunity to sort of at least come at a project from the same position. Now, the other big question is, who needs documentary? The answer is everyone needs documentary. So the beauty of documentary is that, especially after college, wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever work it is, anyone you interact with, they actually need a documentary. They may not know they need a documentary, or they know they need a documentary, but they're not necessarily prioritizing it. So it's important to know that there's actually a real skill involved with this type of work. And it's a life skill. So everybody should really know how to make a doc. Everyone, and it's, with my experience as a company, it's amazing how many people don't really know how to make a doc, or how it works, or what to do. They know they kind of need it, but they have no idea about like what's involved. And it's a shame, because I think if everybody should make a doc and generally have a sense of how it works, because it's such a useful tool. Like there's really no better way to sort of share something and there's so many great stories. There's so many great things that people are doing, and just a short film about it would be the best way to share. It's functional and artable. So the best thing is that it serves a great purpose. It can communicate and be a great tool, but at the same time, you can have fun and create art while doing it. And so I think that's powerful. Now, obviously that's still applicable to narrative films as well, but docs, I think, just have a special place within that realm. So I'm gonna wrap it up and say, go forth and document. And I will end on, here is my email, octillianproductions@gmail.com. I would love to connect with anyone who wants to make a film. It's important, I think, to get feedback, to connect with other people who are making similar work. And so I would like to offer myself as someone that you could to contact and share your work. If you make a doc, I'd love to see it and give any advice that I can. So please feel free to reach out. And I will end on any questions.
Hillary has one in the chat. By the way, I'm Hallie. I was supposed to be the facilitator. I just came late. Oh, drots, it disappeared.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay.
Is your company commissioned to make films, or do you go find subject matter you're interested in and then sell the films after? How do you choose your subject matter?
Sure. And what was it?
Hillary.
Hillary, thanks for the question. Yes, and I'll read it out too. Or I guess did it pick up when you read it?
Yep. Yeah.
Got it. Great question. Yes, so it's a mix of both. I kind of straddle the world of business and arts. So I do a couple things. I run a business and I'm hired by nonprofits to sort of produce short documentaries about the work they do. I do some commercial work. And recently I've actually started working for VPM and been editing and filming some of the news segments on a new news show they just released this year called Focal Point. At the same time, I'm also been hired on a couple projects as an editor for independent documentaries. So I have 2 projects, and I have a work in progress screening, Blue Ridge Barnum, that will be happening tonight or tomorrow night at Tucker Theater at 6:30 for a film that I've been working on. And these are sort of pretty micro budget indie films. Another feature is called Father Spirit, about a son who takes his father who has Huntington disease on a motorcycle trip through the Himalayas in India. And so I'm the editor on those projects. So I've been kind of doing a lot of redrafting and working with a team of people to sort of finish those docs. I have also my own personal projects that I'm doing. And so as far as finding projects, some of them have found me, but I've sort of taken it upon myself to make my business. When I have the time, I make an effort to actually make documentaries for free when I find someone interesting in an organization, because there's the flip side to it, which is you have a barrier to yourself with not having money to make a film, but other people have barriers to having films made about them if there's cost is an issue. So I also try to make a point to offer my skill because I'm also just passionate about doing those projects. And so there was a business owner called Culinary Concepts AB that was doing great work, and he's created a whole cooking class school to help train people in the food industry for the state. And so I ended up doing a documentary for him, I just reached out to him and made a film, and that was a great experience. And so yeah, I think really I try to actually take this whole workshop to heart, and I try to challenge myself to also look for projects that I can do in a sort of simple way. Because I will say too that I've learned, like coming up, I always thought too, like I either need to make a feature doc or a short doc, put it through festivals. But with the way things have changed so much, it's really more about, the festival isn't really that great of a route anymore. It's there's a lot of avenues to go, and really it's just you can make work and put it out, and individual communities can benefit from that. Any other questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
How much do you find that you're still stay in contact with your married peers, and have they been a resource for you and everything?
Yes, they have. I would say that there's been the festival has been great. There's been a contingent of people that come back, and this is Brian, by the way. He's a fellow alum who's also coming back every year.
Mhm.
So the festival's sort of been a great sort of meeting point for alumni who've been interested in film in the past and are doing things now. And 24 Speed has also actually been a huge thing with the alumni 24 Speed. So yeah, there's just people I know, in DC that are working professionally, because there's some of an industry. So they're actually more in an industry. I'm more of just very indie on my own, kind of in Charlottesville, because there's not a huge industry there, but there's definitely some people in DC. I mean, there's a lot of people that have made the transition to LA as well. And I know there's someone I haven't met, but I know there's an alumni working in Austin, Texas, doing great documentaries. But I would say, yeah, I've been able to keep up with a fair amount of alumni, and there's been sort of that nice connection.
Oh, not. Mhm.
So you graduated in 2007,
Right?
is that right? And
2007, I graduated.
cool. So if you were to give some advice, maybe to a student right now who hasn't graduated, say they're sophomore or whatever, and they're interested in making kind of in a similar journey that that you have, what advice, tips would you give them right now?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would say again, why I thought maybe this would be a good workshop is because I would have loved to have heard that documentaries are a great way to make film now, because I was just doing narrative films and I was doing pretty silly narrative films. So, and none of that college type sort of, I mean, it's fun and it was important to my own training and experience and to everything I'm doing now, but none of it translates after college. And so if you make a documentary right now, and it doesn't have to be great, but if you get that experience of, picking a subject, doing a little research, writing questions, filming an interview, and then filming some kind of that subject doing something and then cutting it together, that immediately translates to the real world. And going back to people not necessarily knowing about documentary, there's a lot of people that don't have any film or any kind of work for their companies and what they're doing. And so there's then that next step, which is out of college, making that second film or that third film. And there's lots of people who would appreciate it, even if it's still early stages of the kind of work you're doing. So then, that's the next level. If you can work for some organization or some business and produce content, like that's sort of the next elevation of that sort of path. And it took me a long time to get there because I didn't have that mindset of trying to make docs or trying to tell stories of people around me until much later. So I had to do all that sort of experimenting. I mean, luckily I found a business partner that I kind of cheated with and tagged along. And so got like a quick crash course based on what my business partner was doing. But yeah, I would say that's the coolest thing. It's like, think documentary and you think it now. Don't think you're going to make a documentary later. Thanks.
What are skills that you think are required to be a good documentarian? Like, what are the skills that you think you just gotta have?
Sure. I mean, I think you just need to be curious. You just want to have a question and not be afraid to ask it. I mean, I think you want to always approach subjects with respect and know that you got to think that the film is not a gift you're doing for them. It's more a gift for yourself. And if they're allowing you to make a film about them, then that's amazing that they're letting you do that. And I think if you approach it that way, then it's simply a matter of, you just got to be curious about the world and want to know how it works. Because even though you're a documentarian and you're basically creating something that will help tell other people what it is, I think you have to be the most interested person in the subject to be an effective documentarian. And you just have to like that idea of being interested in something, wanting to know how it works. Because there is this nice layer of filmmaking, which is then you got to figure out how to translate that into film. And I think that's where the art side of documentary really comes in. So, and patience is probably a strong quality for a documentarian. I do have films that I've been working on for 5 years. That's more of a funding issue. If you're good at business and money, which is, that's a whole other thing. It is hard. You focus on the art side too, I think, as a college person when you're first getting into it, but there's definitely a hefty business side to filmmaking, which I haven't figured out, so I'm not going to even really get into that.
So for your formula, you said interview and activity in 1 to 2 minutes. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, the quick doc recipe is more of is a hopefully a more inspiring, that's really easy. I can do that. I could do that in a day kind of feeling, because I think documentaries can sometimes feel overwhelming that you have to film hours and hours of footage. So that main idea there is really the power in a documentary is one, just getting out there, making a decision, filming a couple questions and then something, and then you've got enough material to make something. And you'll be surprised at how how much little footage can travel, once you've got it. And so much of docs are made in the edit that there's a lot of flexibility too, even if you only have like a 15-minute, 20-minute interview. But I think the key is keeping it short. I think the problem with docs, especially if you don't have a lot of time to do them well, or you're doing it quick, is that if you make it a long doc, it's not going to be good. So I think then when you really start getting that experience and you refine is when you challenge yourself to sort of really cut it down. But again, if it's a 15-minute, 30-minute interview, then it's not too bad. That's better than like an hour or 2 hour. But and then you just have to be comfortable letting things go. I think the real key to documentary too is really knowing that sometimes one piece of information is more powerful than two pieces. And there's always this feeling of like, well, I got to say everything. He said that and he does this or that, but no, stripping it away to its essence is a more powerful way to approach film. And sometimes it makes it easier. Sometimes it's harder.
I know you had a whole panel to this effect last year, but could you, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I guess last year was all the remote. But talk a little bit, if you could, about how you established your business and maybe like, how do you present yourself online? Like, what's your marketing presence like? How do people find you?
Sure. Well, again, for establishing a business, this is again connected to this workshop. The first thing you need to do is make something, right? Because if you have a business, everybody's going to want to see some kind of like proof of concept. And so that's why a huge thing that somebody can do right now is just make something. And you make it before you have responsibilities, before someone says, well, I got to have this in a week because of this event, or I'm paying you money, I need you to now change this or do this. Like, before you worry about all those kinds of headaches of producing content for a client, make something for yourself. So you can, one, have the only pressure of yourself on it, and you can kind of actually determine, yeah, this is the kind of work I want to do. I want it to be more commercial, or I'd rather it be more artful. And then from there, you can try to find like, well, who has work already that is similar to mine? And then you could start looking at who you might produce for, or you can start looking at who is a good model of the business you want to be. So you can look at content that another filmmaker is producing. And then you ask yourself, once you've made that smaller film, well, was that good? Did I like it? Is there something different? What's the next stage? Is there something bigger? So you definitely, and then at that point though, you could really reach out to some businesses if you wanted, and you could offer like, I'll make you a short piece for free. Because once that's the next level, is sort of that element of producing content for someone else. And you definitely want to kind of be comfortable with yourself before you engage in that. And from there, if you successfully produce something for a client, you now have somebody who's like, one that you produce content for, who can be sort of a resource. And then you can kind of start charging money for the next project, or do a barter. If you really like a coffee place, you could go say, I'll shoot a promo for you if I can have free coffee, And it's all about relationship building and building a portfolio for yourself, but hopefully on your own terms. That, and plus, yeah, trying to maybe also work with other people, see what they're doing, learning, and just kind of growing the whole process. And yeah, I think for at least the work that I do, which is on the smaller in Virginia, it's really about kind of establishing yourself in a community. So you meet other people who are doing the same work. Maybe they'll hire you. You meet companies in your area. Maybe one company that you do work for and know someone else who needs it. And so it's really based on relationships that way. But again, I think the key would be, one is just making things as soon as possible and building from there. Did I get everything there?
I think so.
What was there one?
Well, I guess just like legally speaking, how do you establish the business?
Sure, yeah. Legally speaking, I think if you are, well, here's the thing, yeah, once you start charging money, usually there's a county or a city that then wants to tax you for the equipment you're using and a business license.
Right.
And they'll want to do that whether you have like an official business or not. Even if you're just suddenly taking jobs on as your own name,
Right.
you're still running a business. So once you get to that level, you do need to get an LLC, and it's mainly two things, which is getting a business license from whatever place that you're operating your business from, and then getting, I think the SEC you have to register. So,
SEC.
yeah. Not the SEC.
Wait,
Not the
S,
SEC,
SEC or
Not
SCC?
not the Southeastern Conference Sports thing.
Securities and Exchange.
I think it's been a while. Yeah, it should be the SSC, Virginia State Corporation. Something, I forget what the second is.
SSC.
Mary
You can
Bunting
eat.
said the State Corporation Commission in the chat.
SCC, right there. You go.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice.
We got there.
So you can also email me too about any of those details.
Sure.
And I'd be happy to share. And then, yeah, I think they are just like an annual, it's not too expensive.
I want to know about, are there any documentaries that you hate, like really famous documentaries that you just despise?
Yeah, Herzog. I don't really like Herzog. He had some jump cuts in Into the Abyss that I hated jump cuts. I really love jump cuts, but you know, there's a certain way to use a jump cut. But I mean, Herzog's all right, but he does have this, there's sort of a parallel philosophy. I mean, his philosophy is more like, you know, break into a place or something like that. You know, there are no locks. And to me, that's a very pompous and selfish way of viewing documentary, because it's almost like you're treating the world as something, as your own personal property or your own place to do what you want. And for me, the documentary is much more of a reaching out and connecting with other people and trying to produce content for them. So I think it's important to have people that have that approach, because you will get different kinds of art, you will get different kinds of questions with that approach, but it's not an approach to model. I don't think it's a universal approach. But I mean, documentary is too interesting too, because there's always that question of like, yeah, like where do you put the documentarian versus the content, or where do you put the art versus what the subject is, you know? So it's always, you know, I certainly aspire to try to put a lot more art into the film, but sometimes it's like, it's just about the sub, you know, if you have a compelling subject, then it doesn't really matter how you're putting it together.
When you're connecting with people, or, you know, creating relationships with people you're interested in for the first time, you know, is it as simple as just asking, or do you have like, you know, like if you just walked into like a diner or something, could you just ask them, or do you need some kind of like permit, you know, or like what separates you from just being some random person off the street, like, you know, coming in? Like,
Do you send like a press package or?
yeah,
I mean, I think the answer always is, it is as simple as just asking,
yeah,
but it's more complicated than that, because I think you do want to figure out what your subject is. And again, like, yeah, there's different approaches, you know, and when you think about news too, there's even a responsibility to get the news, right? You don't want to be asking permission or not stepping on people's toes. Like if it's the more of a news side of documentary, you got to get it if it's important. So, you know, that's one aspect. And that's why I like documentary over news, because that's more about, yeah, just you have to do whatever you can to actually tell the story and tell the side that you should tell, not what maybe the person you're interviewing wants you to tell. But I prefer the documentaries that are much more like, I want to meet somebody, connect with them, and not necessarily try to say, you know, say whatever they want me to say, but I want to at least be honest toward that sort of relationship. So, but again, I think it's complicated, because if you're approaching an multi-billion-dollar organization, then obviously there's certain ways you got to do that. But if it's just a person you know of in your community, then it's easy to you really should just be, yeah, just reach out. You know, that would be the main thing holding back is not reaching out. And it's really not a problem if people say no, I think. because for a doc to succeed, it's really got to be a two-way partnership in a sense. So, I think ultimately just approach with the sense that you really care about who they are and what their story is. Then, that will be the main formula for success in most cases. But there are different documentarians like Roger Moore, and they've got their thing, which is to catch people on the street. You have questions out of
And
it.
Errol Morris, like the sort of pushing.
Michael Moore.
Oh, right. That's right.
Roger Moore was James Bond.
Yeah, not Roger Moore. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know the films there.
And you mentioned
The docs,
Herzog,
Roger.
Herzog, like he's pushing boundaries too, right? I mean, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but he might say something like, well, documentaries don't have to be true.
Right. Well, in a sense, documentaries aren't true, but I would argue that there's maybe nothing is true, even if you just put a live stream. Like this live stream is not true because now we're getting deep, but yeah, your sense of reality is affecting how you're viewing the live stream right now. And so what is reality? Everyone's reality right now is different. But I think truth, like, you don't need capital T truth, right? You just need an honest story that captures some essence of what you're trying to say. And, then people take their own truths from it. But then it's more of a code, right? That you're like, yeah, hopefully you're not trying to make a film that you're trying to confuse somebody or change their views on something in some sort of bad way. But yeah, I don't know. We as humans are it's hard to avoid doing that. But the other thing with subjects, I would say too, is just time, making time. If you can avoid it, don't show up with a camera, just meet and build a relationship because it does take time. As long as that's not a barrier to making it. Then carry the camera with you. But I would also say that, people will say like, your first film is going to be bad, so just get it out of the way. But I would just say it's not so much that it's bad, it's just maybe you have you have varying degrees of audiences for films. But your first bad film could be the best film you could ever make for yourself.